Yeah, come at 9 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay. Let the record reflect we have reconvened with all members present.
Crazy.
All right.
Mayor, we're going to jump right into Mike Piano doing his quick department operating update.
Michael, thank you for staying around.
All those in favor?
It's
Aye.
Good job, Mike.
So moved.
Okay, just a brief rehash of what we did over this past year is we've installed over 3,000 feet of primary voltage cable, over 6,000 feet of secondary voltage cable, approximately 5,500 feet of service cable. We changed over 24 fused cutout boxes, 91 new electrical services, 55 new pole installations, 20 new down guy and anchors. Changed out or added 22 new transformers. We repaired or replaced 125 streetlights, lamp posts, and installations. We replaced SF6 gauges on our underground primary voltage switches in the commercial district. And we've installed new LED lighting in one of our buildings, the Butler building. Current projects that are in the making and in progress right now is the KRE housing project. Our crews are working there currently. New housing development that's going to require quite a bit of work at Kings and Division. We continue to improve junction pole reconstruction. We've got a new building proposed. I believe there's a new building proposed for Greenwood Avenue at behind Walgreens. E-Well transformer is another project that's in play right now. And currently we've got some repair work to do on Greenwood Avenue where a recent storm took a large tree took down and did a lot of damage. Our substation maintenance and repairs, we've just completed our second year of a 3-year testing contract. We replaced perimeter fencing and barbed wire at both substations. Replaced damaged high voltage bushings and repaired damaged busts at James Park Substation, Bank 4A. We installed our own makeshift rubber roof to seal the 15 kV bus duct at James Park, which caused the damage to those bushings that had to be repaired. We've replaced the auxiliary relays at James Park Substation and leaf removal as an annual project that we have to do to get the leaves out of each substation. Our 5-year capital improvements, we just recently took delivery on the submersible transformers for the commercial district at a cost of $120,000. Again, the new security fencing and barbed wire at both substations is $120,000. There's still some work that needs to be done there perimeter-wise. Order has been placed for the handheld radio and AMR meter reading devices. And we are currently waiting for delivery of the lamp posts and fixtures ordered for the Kings Road. That would be from the KRE project to Prospect Street. 2017 projects, we've got a video surveillance system that's scheduled to be put in. We're scheduled to replace both double bucket trucks at a cost of $400,000. Both those trucks are 10 years old, and based on ANSI specifications, those trucks need to be taken off the road or rebuilt completely. Pilot wire relays is a project that our consulting engineer is still working on right now. We haven't made any progress on that. We are about to break ground with our new pole barn construction and storage equipment. That'll be beginning this spring. The stairway replacement at Kings Road Substation. We're still trying to find a contractor that's willing to give us a price quote on doing that. We have to complete our oil filtration system at James Park Sub. And also with the capital, there were continued annual funding for future substation upgrades at a cost of $300,000 per year. I believe that's till 2021, right, Jim? We're going to purchase a new pad mount transformer for B-Well. Basically, that's the state of our our system right now. System's in good shape. Oh, I'm sorry. Substations, we're going to complete the 3-year testing of maintenance this year. Installation of fans at transformer Bank 4B at James Park. And the installation of the tap changer oil filtration systems, Bank 3A and 4A. Our operating budget continues to be sufficient for maintaining the proper level of materials and equipment. In the overall view, the electric distribution system is in good condition. Substations are annually tested and well maintained. The distribution system is in very good condition, and we continually assess and upgrade as needed.
The misspelling.
Ben told me about that.
Not my spelling.
Yeah, okay.
So outside of spelling corrections, any questions? Ben, you'll need to come up to the microphone, though. You can grab that seat. We'll let Bob go first while you grab.
Mike or Jim, either one. The large dollar amounts in the 2017 projects, specifically the double bucket trucks, the pole barn, and the, I'm assuming the future substation upgrades, were they in the 5-year plan last year? So they're nothing new? Okay, fine.
Actually,
Thank you.
the pole barn was from 2015, I believe.
Okay.
It was funded.
That's fine. Thank you.
Ben?
Yes, thank you.
Carmelo?
My question is, over the last, and you pick it, 5, 10 years, how often has it happened that you found that you were underappropriated in terms of the money you had? In other words, something came up that was totally unanticipated, like Sandy, and you needed more money and it hadn't been budgeted. Has that happened?
No. Again, my budget's pretty much been the same for the past 10 years. And it's more than sufficient. And if anything I do need out of the ordinary, I come and ask for it in capital.
I'm going to jump in and answer that a little bit, Ben, and say that for both Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Irene, we did have to take extraordinary measures financially to do that by shifting over. We were able to shift over money that had been appropriated for power purchase that it turns out we didn't need. And as you know, we spent $1 million. We and Bob did a great job getting it back from FEMA, but there have been some times that we've had to do some pretty extreme measures over the last 10 years. Nothing Michael had to worry about, but stuff that administration had to worry about.
And we had no idea what that was going to cost until it was all said and done.
Carmelo?
Yeah. Mike, I've been meaning to ask you this, so here it is. KRE housing project that you have to consider. You also have the Elm Street housing project, Greenwood Avenue housing project, and whatever. What do you anticipate, or could there be a problem with getting these projects completed? KRE seems to be really working very quickly there. And
No, there's no.
No?
We'll get that completed. Yeah, I can think of a word to describe that entire project, but I'm not going to use it here.
Thank you.
Well, I'm sure we've heard it. So you don't anticipate having like any problems with getting KRE up and running and whatever?
No.
Okay.
In fact, our crews were there working there today.
Yeah. Okay.
We're not far from completion.
Oh.
They're far from completion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know to what extent actually you were working there. I would assume lampposts and running. Yeah.
Well, the lampposts and fixtures, that's minimal.
It's an entirely.
Yeah, that's minimal. I'm not concerned about that. The problem was the winter. The site itself was a mud hole. Mm-hmm. The coordination between the contractors and us, we've bent over backwards for them. They're not exactly running like a Swiss watch.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Pat?
Yeah, one question on your 2017 projects, the video surveillance system, the pilot wire relays, the pole barn construction, the stairway replacement, and the oil filtration system. I don't see any of them on the 2017 capital plan. Are they carryovers?
They're carryovers. They were
They are, okay.
previously budgeted for in prior years. I don't remember which exact year they came from.
Okay, so this year, the real projects that you're adding to the mix are the automated meters, the well transformer, your 2 trucks,
Right.
and the signal camera actuators.
Signal actuators, Bob Vogel handles a lot of that traffic stuff.
Okay. Was Bob going to finally fix the signal at Ridgedale and Park? Ooh. Running joke. Thank you.
More ways than one. Maureen?
Mike, the 40,000 for replacing the historic fixtures at the train station in 2020, what fixtures are those?
The fixtures that are currently in front of the train station are the original modeled Victorian type fixture that doesn't match what we have throughout the rest of the town.
Oh, okay.
That's what we originally had, that type of fixture. They're a pain in the neck to work on. The maintenance is horrible on them. I just figured at that point in time we could upgrade them, and that would the entire town would look the same.
Okay.
We are going to add the newer style along the front of
Along Kings Road.
along Kings Road on the south side. Yes.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Well done, and it's always good to get brought up to date on the accomplishments of the great electric utility.
Thank you.
Figure out how to do this as fast as I can while not giving anything short shrift. And I will say that all of this is already online. If you go to the annual budget process on RoseNet, this entire presentation is already on there. This is just a schedule. I'm sorry, I apologize, the agenda for the evening. This is a schedule where we're having our initial budget review tonight. All the other department heads other than Michael will be here next Monday night. This is just a chart showing the budget cycle where we obviously have to have conversations about all of these, and typically we go maybe around the circle twice till we have a full comprehension of all the different items that we have to deal with. I'm going to skip these slides here, and as I talked to Ben and Austri and the mayor today, I'm going to create a separate kind of budget 101 document, because some of this stuff to a council member, they kind of immediately know. To a newer council member, it helps. To someone in the audience who wants to learn about it, it's going to help. So I'm going to create a separate presentation that has these kind of items on it. It just talks about the 3 different budgets that you all deal with. There's 3 different capital accounts that you deal with each of those budgets. I think you've heard me talk before about, is it a budget or is it a spending plan? I will always drive home during the budget process that this is not like a corporate budget where it can change if you get a big contract. And it's not like my home budget where if Sarah gets a better paying job, we can go on vacation or spend more money. This is a spending plan where at the beginning of the year, you all are going to vote on the budget, and every line in that black book, which is the entire line-by-line budget, and then that's it. We really can't spend any more money, so we kind of have to project what we need for snow removal, whether it's going to be snowy or mild. We need to project what our fuel expenses are going to be and don't really know what the fuel costs are going to be. So I'll always try to drive that point home, but I'm not going to talk about that much tonight. We'll talk tonight about this. These are the kind of what I think are going to be the 4 important decisions that council is going to have to deal with this year with the budget. What's the right amount of general capital for this year and beyond? Spending, are there any services that you want to enhance or reduce? Taxes, what's the right amount of taxes? And electric utility surplus, what should be done with the excess? We do have an excess of electric utility surplus here. We're going to skip through this since Michael already gave his presentation, and I apologize. We're going to go to general capital real briefly. General capital is the capital not tied to utilities. It's the capital that we do streets, that we do vehicles and DPW items and alike. There is a general capital improvement fund, which is the pot of money that we have aside. And when you vote on ordinances, that's the money. That's where that money comes from. Every year, you all, in the budget, determine an amount of money that gets put aside in that pot. Right now we have, assuming that this budget passes, make sure I'm doing this right, Assuming that we include a $3.8 million injection back into this fund, we'll have $5 million. That will fund us for this year, but one of the important decisions for council is going to be 2017 and 18, because as you see from this 5-year capital plan, these red numbers highlight the budget that we're, at least at this point in time, assuming for all these different categories: police, fire, library, road reconstruction, storm sewer, and alike. Next week, I'm going to probably be pernicious and push back and make sure that you all are asking the department heads about their 5-year capital plan. The way Michael had his 5-year capital plan up here, every department head will have that 5-year capital plan up there. I even suggest that if you're the liaison for the department, that you maybe have a conversation with your department head about it, because as I see it right now, we can have a sustainable amount of capital projects at around $4.2 million. And so with these numbers here of $6 million and $5 million, something has to change. And you can tell me that, and we can make that work, but that means that we're, at jeopardy of not, doing any electric dividend, and at jeopardy with doing other things in the budget. So to that end, I want Bob Vogel to come up here real quickly, since he's stayed here for this time. And I just want to talk a little bit about something that's going on in the water utility on Central Avenue. Come on up, Bob.
Okay. So the overall layout of the 5-year capital plan hasn't changed much since January when we circulated it last. And obviously, the general capital has a number of asks in it, which we may have to modify over the next month or so in response to any limitations that we have in terms of the $4.2 million. So, Michael, you just heard from as far as electric utility and the water utility. We have appropriated in part already this year for the road-related projects, minus Central Avenue. And Central Avenue, as the cost estimates and plans and specifications have come together, apparently there's been several conversations with the water utility about the extent of the project. The overall scope has been increased so that a section of water main between Fairview and Ridgedale is now expanded to water main all the way down to water main replacement, at least a proposal for water main replacement all the way down to Walnut Street, which is a very significant add. And so the challenge here is that the Central Avenue component of the water capital budget is going to be proposed to increase $500,000, maybe $600,000 over what its current ask is, which is $270,000. So again, a very significant change, which could have impacts in other areas. And so, we've had several conversations about that with the administration. We believe we can get the work done. But as it stands, the water capital budget is one that will be modified in terms of its proposal over the next couple of weeks, and perhaps some of the general capital items as well.
Just as a reminder for those watching at home and in the audience, that Central Avenue is a county road. It is scheduled for milling and overlay, and county would put a moratorium on any road openings if we do not do it now.
Correct.
And so if this was Greenwood, for example, we might approach it in more stages, but since we have to partner with the county, we have to work with their schedule as well as ours.
100% correct, Mayor. We are under a little bit of pressure because the county's had this on their resurfacing plan for over a year now, and they want to get it done. So I suspect later this year they're going to again ask if we are ready to do that work, and if we put them off for some time in terms of getting the water main replaced, then I would think 2018 is as late as the county can possibly be put. From what I understand, through the field investigation that's just been done, the water main that's to be replaced is not actually the 4-inch, which we've concentrated on historically over the past 15 years. The 4-inch water main replacement program that the borough has put into place was concentrated on water quality improvements, which were mandated by the DEP over 15 years ago. And so that was really the focus of our efforts for many, many years. And continues to be so, except that the 4-inch is starting to disappear throughout town because of our replacement program. So what happens now is we've actually gone to a piece of 6-inch and larger diameter main, which now age becomes the issue. Not the fact that there's a water quality problem, but there's tending to be a capacity problem and an operational problem through leaks and valve replacements and other characteristics of the older water mains, which would mandate that they also be replaced in a certain period of time. So Central Avenue is a combination of a larger water main replacement, which is older, and the 4-inch water main replacement, which is intended to improve water quality. So as a whole, the age of the main could be up to 100 years old as far as some of the older hydrants that we see, and really needs to be part of this program. And so there is some real imperative to getting it done. And I think what we need to do also moving forward is take a look at the larger diameter mains that are significantly older and put a program together that works for the borough. This was a bit of a surprise. So we hope it doesn't happen again, but for now, that is the ask. And if there's anything else, please ask.
So in terms of 6-inch pipe, how many miles of pipe do we have that's actually that old, or how many feet?
That's that age?
Borough-wide?
What I know of is the larger diameter transmission mains throughout town, which are 10 and 12-inch. And I believe I spoke to you at one point when we did Sampson Avenue about having a replacement program. That was about 3 years ago. But we were still concentrating on replacing the 4-inch at that stage of the game. But I think at that point we had talked about having a replacement program put into place for the larger mains. And so it'd be difficult to wing it, but I think for the 6-inch, probably about 5 miles, Pat.
Okay. How long would it take before we have a better sense of what we're looking at so we can start to really look at a multi-year plan?
I think certainly by this time next year, we'll have a very good idea, but hopefully by the fall.
Okay. Second question is, if we decide to do this additional work on Central Avenue, how's that going to impact the schedule of the work that needs to get done?
If we can bid this May, and we have a 120-day schedule, good chance we can get the water main replacement completed by the end of the summer. Then the decision that we have to make is, do we want to let the trench rest and ask the county to delay until spring of 2018, or do we allow the county to go ahead in the fall of 2017?
If we bid it in May, though, we're not going to be voting as a council to approve a contract until late in June, I would think.
It'll be fall before the project gets done. You're correct.
Is there any way we could do it sooner than bidding it in May?
I believe we need to actually appropriate the funds first. And I'm not sure with the general capital budget approval, which happens during the operating budget approval as well in the April to May timeframe, we're going to have the opportunity to do that.
Well, then I guess this question is for Jim. So we've already approved some capital projects. Have we reached the limit of what we can approve given what the borough sort of has in its coffers?
We don't have the money in the water capital fund until we have the budget hearing and adopt the budget. So if the budget gets adopted in April, then Bob can put that bid on the street in April, and that at least gives us a month earlier time frame to get it done. But that is probably the only solution. I'll see if there's any others. But that's the premise that we're working under.
But you're now talking about having Central Ave ripped up in the fall when school starts, if we do it this year. What did you say, Bob, was the problem with waiting until next year and getting our ducks in a row and maybe appropriating the money late this year and having everything lined up to do it on a better schedule next year?
Yeah, I think the county will cooperate with us regardless, but I think obviously road conditions are going to continue to deteriorate on Central Avenue. They're already poor. So the
We
county
have
would
to-
like to get the paving done as soon as they can.
We have to balance that against the type of impact it's gonna
Absolutely.
do to the
Absolutely.
residents
I
for an
talked to the
extended
county
period of
engineer
time.
last week, and they said if we have to do it in 2018, we'll do it in 2018.
Okay, thank you.
Carmelo?
Bob, it only makes sense, though, at this point, if we have a 100-year-old in there, before we let the county in here to do some paving and sidewalks and all kinds of stuff, that was planned for Central Avenue, it seems that it's better if we do the water main as quickly as we can prior to it. Because they come in and they start paving, and a water main breaks, we're going to start ripping up the road. Then it's going to look like, Fairview did look like, after Public Service got their hands on it. So I think that this is a great solution at this point. Do you have the specs already? Do you understand what is needed to go out to bid? I know I've talked to Frank about this, and he's pretty.
Yeah, I think Frank feels relatively confident.
Yeah.
Certainly I do as well. So, even in the worst of circumstances, I'm quite sure we can get the whole thing on the street by May.
Yeah. I think probably what we really have to consider is, do we want that to rest and then do the paving in 2018? That's a big decision, because if you don't let it rest, we know what happens. You get.
Not only that, to Pat's point, there's two significant schools along that route, and
Yeah.
having the roads ripped up during that time frame is not perfect.
Yeah.
We'd rather have the county doing their job in the middle of the summer.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Why would the water main only stop at Walnut? Why not all the way to Main Street?
Actually, we're looking at that now as well, Austria. It's, Frank had mentioned to me that potentially we could continue past Walnut Street. There's a section at Walnut Street which we replaced 3 or 4 years ago. And I asked him to go back and take a look at possibly extending it down to Main Street. So he's putting those numbers together as we speak.
Okay.
Is that all the same vintage? Except for the new part that you did 4 years ago.
As far as I know, the hydrants, if they're an indicator, are very old and they're dated. So a lot of those hydrants have early 1900s dates on them.
So in all likelihood, when you take a look, you'll discover that you need to.
It makes.
Project.
I think, again, if we're going with the rationale that getting it done now is the proper course of action, and I believe we agree with that. Getting it all done is important to do all the way down to Main Street. Yeah.
Thank you.
I want to stress that, and we'll talk about this later, the sustainability of the water capital is somewhere around $700,000 a year. So this is a much larger year in terms of expenses, and the only way we can afford it is by drawing down $1 million from the water surplus, and we'll talk about that later. Administration supports it, though, because, as you all have said, it's a 100-year-old water main that needs to be replaced, and now's the time to do it, and it makes no sense to have 5 years from now, or even during the construction of the road, the water main start to fail. So we'll talk more about that when we have the water, when we discuss the water utility budget, operating budget. Any questions on that? Okay, next week I'll push you on the department heads and all the other numbers that we have to worry about here in 2018 and 19. So the municipal budget, this is, whoops. Did I have something there? Nope. So this is the municipal budget that you are typically used to seeing. We will have the new version that came out from strategic planning at the next session, and we'll go through this real quickly and real briefly, and then I'll answer some questions, because I think there'll be some good questions out there. Administration is going to be creating, as I said before, a document that for the person that may be at a meeting for the first time may not understand what all these different lines are. What does the legal line contain? What does utilities mean? And so we'll create a key, if you will, that has the definition for all these lines, along with other stuff, kind of a budget 101 document. What's good is this budget, which I call the budget in brief, there are versions of this that go all the way back to 1986 on RoseNet. So if you go on RoseNet under Finance Department, you can see this document going all the way back to 86. And even though the format's changed slightly over the years, it's still feasible to make meaningful comparisons and see what the salary and wages was like in 1990 versus what the salary and wages are like now. To that end, I encourage everyone to go to RoseNet, to the annual budget process page. It looks like this. It's updated constantly. And as a matter of fact, right there, it's talking about the budget in brief. This has the entire budget cycle for this year. It has the presentation materials that council received last year and in 2015 as well. So there's a wealth of information here. It talks about, we kind of have three different documents that we've produced. We produced the budget in brief that I call there, which has got a whole lot of numbers on it. We have the colorful one-sheet budget information summary that was mailed out, which was also downstairs. And then if you really want to, we have the 150-page audit document, which there's a few people out there that I know like looking at that. All three of those documents are available right off of this page. Going to the budget, I want to talk about some of the cost drivers. The first thing to note is that the budget in totality is only going up by 1.7%. Which is excellent. There's been no reduction in any services, no reduction in the amount of capital being spent. One of the largest cost drivers is the Madison-Chatham joint meeting. And you all know what's going on there, but I don't think the general public fully knows that there's just a lot of additional expenses going on there, and Council of Madison and Council of Chatham working together on determining the split of numbers and then cost increases due to mitigation of phosphorus over there. That mitigation is going to continue in the future, as you all know, but the public should know that there's been discussion about potentially doing some bonding there. The net cost of the borough would be about, I believe, over $200,000 a year. Even though it's a Madison-Chatham joint meeting item, all their debt service gets split between Madison and Chatham, and that falls under our line of debt service. It does not fall under the Madison-Chatham joint meeting line. It falls under the line of debt service as an environmental infrastructure trust loan, and so we anticipate that line going up potentially a couple $100,000 in the out years, so that's a concern. This is our current amount of long-term debt payments that we need to make without this in hand, so it's not really dropping that much. I mean, clearly it's down $150,000 in 2022, but if we go out and borrow another $200 or $300, it'll be back up. Real briefly, the council's talked. Are there any questions on that? Do you want to talk about the Madison-Chatham joint meeting at this point in time, or just let? I think you all know that's an issue. Two systemic issues that the council has been trying to work out for the last few years while I've been in this position. One is the water utility and the finances not being as sustainable as they should be, and the capital needs and the transfer of funds from the water utility to the municipal budget. And trying to fix that. And the second is the strategic planning guidelines that dictate we should reduce the amount of money being transferred from the water and electric utility. And we're offering a solution here that I think we'll talk about at a couple of meetings, and I'll just briefly talk about it here. And it has to do with the way we view property taxes. And I think I'm going to go through very quickly an example that's in the presentation that I think will help anyone, including my high school daughter, said she understood it after I explained it to her, which is you can have a tax increase in our budget, and it will not result in a tax increase in Joe's house or Austri's house or Pat's house. And so here's our little example of Conleyville, which has 4 homes and an empty tract of land, and each house has $10 in taxes, and the vacant land is $5 in annual property taxes. And so Conleyville raised $45 in property taxes last year. During last year, the person who owned the vacant lot built a house. And so there's the shiny new house. And that shiny new house is now going to pay $10 in taxes, because when you make improvements on your property, you have to pay more. And Pat's nodding his head because he just made improvements on his house. So, in any event, so that house is now paying $10. Conleyville's budget for 2017 went from $45 to $50. And so the budget went up, but none of the houses had to pay any more money except Pat Rowe, or whoever we're going to say built that new house there. So that new home absorbed the entire budget increase. That is essentially what has happened here in the borough for the last 3 years. Our taxes on the budget line, on this line here, not to bore people too much, this budget line here that says property taxes has gone up by 3%. But the property taxes on my home, on Ray's home, on the mayor's home, on Austria's home have gone up by 0.2%. And the difference in that is the fact that all the new construction picked up the difference. So I'm happy to talk about that more. There's my little Q&A that I did that helped Paige understand it. I think you've seen this document before that talks about property taxes only going up by 0.2% over that 3-year period. And as before, it went up by 3% during that time in terms of the municipal dollars that came in, but it was picked up by all the assessed ratables and the increase in assessed ratables, the new construction, if you will. Here's the actual budget line. Here it is. There's property tax in 2013. Here's property tax in 2016. That's a 3% increase, but if I calculated your home, you'd see it's only 0.2%. And here's the difference. Thanks to Tom Bittinger for telling me to put this little sheet in here. This talks about the assessed values. If you add up the assessed value of everyone's home in town, and it shows the increase, sorry about that, it shows the increase every year. Now, the increase is new construction, it's renovations. It does get knocked down when there are tax appeals that we settle. So right now, as you can see, every year for the last 4 years, we've had an increase in the assessed ratables. So all those properties and homes that add up to all that amount, they're the ones that picked up 2.8% of our 3% increase over the last few years, which is great. Which is great. So we're proposing looking at taxes in a different way, because if I were to say the municipal property tax is going up by X, everyone thinks their tax on their home is going to go up that way. And that's not the case, as we learned from Conleyville. So what we've decided to do is kind of split that line in the budget so we can look at it and say, okay, my house, nothing's changed, so my property taxes on a municipal side would go up by 2%. And then we represent the additional taxes that would be picked up by the new increase in ratables. This $29 million here, $29,939,000 in new ratables will pay $121,000 in taxes. Just wanted to separate that out because I think that much more clearly explains how property taxes work, and much more clearly explains to the average resident how much my tax is going to go up. So to that end, if we do that, that helps us solve those two systemic problems that we talked about, the over-reliance on the electric utility and the water utility having not being sustainable. So you can see here that we have $121,000 that's being picked up in new construction property taxes, and we were able to reduce our reliance on the water utility surplus by $100,000 and our reliance on the electric utility surplus by about $65,000. So what that means to the people that don't know is that we actually transfer a bit of money from the utilities into our municipal budget, and we've been doing it since 1944 at least. And I say that because I'm going to hold up my 1944 annual report of the municipal affairs of the Borough of Madison. There's an excerpt in here that shows that even way back then, we were using surplus from the utilities to keep our taxes down. It's interesting, and this is fun. It actually shows how Madison's property tax compared to other towns is lower. And that's something that we're still touting today, that our all-in property tax is lower than our neighbors because I think the benefits of the utility. So I don't know if you want to talk about this concept now, or if you want to just kind of have me keep going through the budget, but I think that's going to be one of the important decisions you all are going to have to make. Remember, I talked about 4. One of them is property taxes, and is this the right amount? So if there are any questions, if not, I can go along, and then maybe at the end you can jump in with questions.
Let's keep going.
Yep,
Okay.
you're on a roll.
On a roll, okay. Couple quick things, state aid and grants. State aid has not changed at all. We had a reduction in the number of grants, so as you're looking at that, sorry about that, state aid and grants. I just don't want you to think, geez, what's going on? Why is state aid's not down? But it's been flat, and I think I wrote a number in there. It's been flat since 2010. So that's a challenge. When you have a revenue source that's flat and you know your expenses are going up, you've got to find the money elsewhere. So I am not going to talk about what is municipal surplus, and I'm not going to talk about where the surplus is in the budget or what free balance is. I'm going to let everybody read that online. I will say that we are planning on using a little more municipal surplus than we did last year, and that's because we had a very good year in municipal surplus. And I can't really gloss over it. I've got to go over at least a little bit here. So this number here is the municipal surplus that's generated on an annual basis. And municipal surplus is a very good thing. It shows that you're being very good stewards with the money, and the department heads are being good stewards of the money. So we had a good year in municipal surplus, driven primarily by construction and tax collection. And as a result, we generated 4.587. We generated 4.673. This is the number here of surplus that's generated. We're going to take out almost as much as we generated. That's kind of driven by the strategic planning guidelines. We can talk about that more in a little bit. So those surplus numbers drop into the budget here. And what I like is that we're not using all the surplus for operating. We're actually able to use some of it for capital, which I think is important. So that's an important revenue line on the budget. And I want to go back to it because I know there are a couple of questions that I did not answer in here that I probably shouldn't have done that. I'm just going back to the one that's all the bright numbers. Pat had asked, hey, Jim, why is department operating going up by 10%? More than that, 11.9% right here. And there are copies of the budget document there if anybody wants to see it that has this in it. The reason that's happening is over $200,000 of this $305,000 is due to a shifting of expenses from salaries to a contract that we have with Bloomfield for our Board of Health. So salaries went down because we are no longer employing through salary and wages a health officer, a health educator, and a deputy registrar. We're now doing it via contract with the Bloomfield Board of Health. So consequently, the salary line item went up by 0.28%. It was very small because we were including those expenses there. So I think it's important to point that out. Also, the legal expense going up by a large percentage, $25,000, but 11.9%. That's line 16 here. The legal expenses, Ray and I are anticipating going up because we have 7 collective bargaining units, and we figured we're going to need some additional legal money just this year to work through those negotiations. Are there any questions on the municipal budget as we see here?
Well, I'll just restate, Jim and I had a conversation this afternoon. I would like to see more detail around the revenue, the which line is it?
Municipal sources, line 2.
Municipal sources, yes. How many of them are almost like sort of guaranteed, and how many of them are fluctuating, kind of bouncing up and down? The other thing is, then that brings you into where the surplus is coming from, and how much of that is sustainable. I mean, we've been growing it at a pretty good clip. I want to know if we're going to hit a wall at some point and have to deal with that, and or if we should actually start to think about how do we constrain it a bit, because we are, when you get to the end, I don't want to give away the secret, but we are using a larger percentage this year than last year, and last year we were over the amount that was recommended, but we're kind of in a situation where if we want to draw down the utility reliability, it's got to come from somewhere, and this is sort of where it is right now.
Yes. And sustainability is the key. When we have a situation where we have Kings Road being built, a lot of construction fees coming in for that. We won't have that in 3 years. We have Allergan now doing all the development at Geralda 5, but we tend to estimate $500,000 in construction fees, but last year and this year it's going to be over $1 million. So all of a sudden you end up with an extra $500,000, but that's not sustainable unless we think that we're just going to continue to have that type of major construction going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's the type of money we need to use as, surplus that we put into capital. So it's not, we're not using it to run the borough, but we are utilizing it wisely.
Yep. So it is important and probably worth having a conversation another time about what generates surplus. It's talked about here in lines 7 through 12. Ben?
Yes, I was just wondering, are you going to speak to the free balance issue in the electric utility?
I can. Yes, that's later on. So I'll touch on that because I think that's an important topic when we get to utilities. In general, free balance is, as it says here, it's a good thing. It's something we've been publishing the last 2 years. You have surplus, which is the excess that's left over when you don't spend the entire line on snow removal or alike, or when we anticipate that we're going to collect 98% of the taxes, and Mary and Hattie and Chrissy hit it out of the park and collect 99.9% of the taxes. Those things end up building up the surplus, and that's what's happened over the last few years. Free balance is basically the difference after you take out surplus for the budget. So it's the green area here, if you will. And we have a need to peg that in the utility as well, and I think it's a good time to shift right over to the utilities.
Hey, Jim, one question about the free balance. So that's money that, even after we take money out of the end-of-year surplus to run the borough, is still sitting in our bank account.
Yes.
We were talking before about, if we get hit with another Sandy, are we not allowed to tap into that money in an emergency with an emergency appropriation or budget
Correct.
adjustment?
Correct. Free balance protects you in case something happens this year in the surplus generation, and you have a terrible year for generating surplus. You kind of have next year's surplus in reserve.
Okay.
But also, if there's an emergency, you can do a special emergency appropriation and use that free balance in the current year.
Okay. And then, in addition to that, last year we ended the year with $8.1 million. I think that's the way I read this. No, beginning of the year, we ended with 8.6. We're taking out 4.5, leaving 4. So, during the course of the year, there was $8.6 million that we slowly built to from the 4 that we started. So that money is somewhere in our budget, correct, as an expense? Or some of it's expense, some of it's excess revenue?
What happens actually, Pat, is we end up with 3.931 after we take that out, right? So we've got the 8.1 million here. We took out 4.2, the 3.931, which is the free balance, is left over. Then a lot of it doesn't. I mean, I guess it gets accounted for, and it's in the checkbook. But the journal entries actually happen at the end of the year. Certain things happen. We recognize the revenue that's come in excess of what we anticipated. And I think I've talked about this before, appropriations. What happens is in 2015, we set the budget for snow removal, and we said it was going to be, I'm going to use a fictitious number of $200,000. If we only spent $100,000 in snow removal as of the end of 2015, that, or let's say 120, that residual $80,000 sits on the books for the following year. The reason we do that is there may be bills that come in. Oh, geez, January 5th, January 10th, January 20th. There may be bills that came in that really were for 2015, and we didn't get to them. And then at the end of the year, whatever's left over, that $80,000 is what lapses into surplus. So you'll see. I'm going to go back. Oh, I'm going to go, sorry. Balance beginning of the year, less utilized. Sorry, I apologize. I want to make sure I get to the right.
You're looking for the detailed
Go back a
version of
couple
it.
more. I've got it in there. Under slide 38. So here's where it's being generated and cancellation. I just talked about the cancellation of the prior year appropriations. That's this number here. So some years we have a whole lot to cancel, some years we don't. It clearly ebbs and flows a significant amount. Same with delinquent taxes, big difference there. Some years we had these huge FEMA payments that just came out of the sky thanks to Bob Landrigan. So every year the parts seem to change, but in the end we're doing well in surplus. So we need to tighten up on some estimates and do some other things to not make so much surplus.
A quick question in that vicinity. Looking again at free balance. Oh, I'm sorry. Looking again at free balances, you said they could be used in an emergency. What restrictions are there on how it's used?
Well, I'd have to get back to you on that, but it would have to be a special emergency appropriation that the council would have to come up with, and have to have a vote on it, and requires two-thirds of the majority of the sitting council, not who's present. There's a number of rules and the way and how and where and how it can be used. And any special emergency that you fund this year then has to go in the budget next year. So it kind of really causes the state says, well, if you goofed and you didn't have it this year, then you got to put it in the budget next year. So all of a sudden it's double hit on the budget. And so you end up having to budget it for the following year and as well. So we try to avoid it. And we try to avoid that by being conservative on the appropriations that we establish.
So although it's there for an unforeseen circumstance, it's not that flexible.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's not something that we can just, decide all tomorrow to, have a party or something and go spend it on that. It's really there for emergency. And as I said, I think the best way to think of it is we have next year's surplus set. So in case some calamity happens, we know we've got a year to kind of do a soft landing and figure out any sort of major systemic issues that happen in the budget. So I talked a little bit. There's my little line there that shows in 1943 how much they took out for utilities and how much they had in taxes, and it was a huge year for utility transfer. They had almost no property taxes that year. Pretty sure that's why they published it, to let everybody know. So I'd like to jump to the water utility real quick, and I'll just go through this. Last year there were record sales in the water utility. The metered collections, line number 6 of $2.7 million, was historic. As we talked about, the 100-year-old water main on Central Avenue will cost close to $1 million. So remember, on my other chart, it had $1.5 million. There's the $1.5 million that you're going to take out. So in this particular year, it will be a year where you will take out significantly more in surplus, or you will draw down the surplus in the water capital significantly. And you can see that number here. We're going to try to get this number to be flat, and it kind of bounces back to almost flat in 2018. That number right there is being drawn down significantly. That's the beginning balance in a surplus transferred to the budget generated in the current year is negative 500. So we didn't generate, we actually lost surplus during the year is what we're anticipating. The end of the year balance will be $1 million. I'm really want to make sure that we get the water utility to a sustainable position, and we made some adjustments in our budget to do that. The first thing is that we're recommending taking out less from the water utility to go to the municipal budget, and that's line 2. And the second thing we're recommending is we worked and looked at our operational expenses, and I've explained this to some of the elected officials. We have a number of expenses that are split between the electric utility and the water utility. And when Ray and I looked at it, we realized sometimes the split didn't make a whole lot of sense. The water utility has meters that are read once a quarter, once every 3 months. Electric utility is read once a month. So arguably, any expense should be 3 to 1. It should be 1 to 3, 1 to 4 in relation to the water versus electric. And we didn't have splits going that way with insurance, with employees, because we split employees for the utility billing and others. So we made some adjustments in the operation operation expenses of the water utility and just shifted over them to the electric utility. And you'll see that in a few minutes. The electric utility being $22 million, a $200,000 change in that utility doesn't doesn't have a great impact. But a 200,000 impact on the water utility takes it, and a drop in line 2, the transfer to the municipal budget, those two things basically put us back on track to make the water utility sustainable. So I'm happy that we're able to come to you with a solution that offers that. So I'm going to skip real quickly these slides. That shows the 400,000 that gets transferred from the water utility to the municipal budget, and there's the municipal budget where that line shows up as a revenue. As I said below, as I've said before, I think $700,000 is the right number for capital. So this is a one-time big hit for the Central Avenue. Beyond that, we've got to make sure we can work within $700,000. If not, we're going to have to kind of look to figure some other things out.
Well, that's where I think we really need Bob's guys to take a look at what do we really need for the next 10 years for the larger distribution part of the network. And then make a decision about where the revenue is going to come from if we need to bump it up.
Agreed. So the electric utility, I think we sold the most electricity we have ever sold this year, dollar-wise. So $23 million is our estimate. We're going to be closing the books in the next few days. That number might change ever so slightly, but that's higher than the last 2 years. And if we were to play it out a few years before that, it shows that it's clearly the highest that we've had in a number of years, and it was a protractedly long, hot summer. It wasn't a couple of hot days. There was a number of moderately hot days. Because of that, we generated $700,000 more in revenue than what we had estimated. That, along with judicious spending, has resulted in quite a large increase in the electric utility surplus. I'm going to jump to the operating real quick, and here's where I was talking about the water utility dropping a couple $100,000. Here's where the electric utility operating expenses are increasing by a couple hundred. So that's where that reshifting of expenses occurred. Block contracts, we have now finally locked into last contract for 2019-20. Council gave me authority to do that, and last Thursday we locked in at a price of $31.55, which is excellent. I'll have at the next meeting our whole block portfolio to show you, but that does allow us to project out line 8, the block contract costs, and you can see the significant drop that we've had there and the significant savings. We are anticipating transmission costs to go up, but that may or may not happen, but if I was playing poker with Bob Landrigan, I'd probably put a bet on the transmission costs going up. So with that, I wanted to see if there were any questions on the electric utility before we talked about any, in terms of the operations, before we talked about any possible dividend. Because that's something that we talked about back in October, November. We're in the process of getting that established in our utility billing, and it's our hope to be able to do a dividend this year. Ben.
Yes, thank you. Although Mike Piano said that he hadn't needed to call on funds in addition to what he's asked for in his budget, we had talked about putting some rainy day money, as it were, in the expenses of the electric utility. Where should I look for those?
So I misunderstood the conversation. I thought we were talking about the free balance in the electric utility.
No, I brought that separate from that.
Separate from that?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the electric utility.
I'll have to get back to it. I don't know if
what I'm getting at is like you have expenses, block contracts, capacity. So and you have electric utility capital. Shouldn't there be an expense line if we're holding back money in case of unforeseen events?
So what's that?
That's the free balance.
Well, we do have the money in the capital account, absolutely, which we have a fair amount, can be used at any point in time for any sort of infrastructure failure where we have to go out and hire someone. So I think that's where we would have those funds. There is a certain amount in the operating that Michael can use on various consultants and on various contracts and what have you, but the rainy day fund's really in the capital. side of that. So,
Okay, and the capital includes the 300,000 that we've agreed to
correct.
put aside each year for substation.
Correct.
Okay.
I want to point out what Ben had talked about before, which is we talked about free balance in the municipal utility. The free balance that we're pegging for the electric utility, or that administration is advancing, is going to be a much lower amount. It's reflected in this number here what the actual free balance is, but over the course of time, I think administration would be comfortable with pegging that at about $1.5 million. So we have excess, that free balance is excess surplus. We have excess surplus above and beyond what we think is the right amount to be holding, and as a result, and that's because we had an excellent year in 2016 in generating surplus. The beginning balance was $8 million, the ending balance was $10 million, so we generated almost $2 million of additional surplus. So to that end, I think we should have a conversation about how to give that back.
Yeah. Jim, have the auditors given any indication of what an appropriate free balance amount would be?
We've had some conversations with them, and they're comfortable with that $1.5 million number. And we've had a quick conversation with the rating agencies, and I think they're comfortable with as having a plan and sticking to the plan is the most important part of what they want to hear and see. They don't want to see numbers vacillating. So, if we were to come out and take an extra $3 million out of surplus this year just because it was there and spend it and use it on operating, that would be frowned upon. So we're looking to do the exact opposite, use less electric utility surplus in the operating budget and rely less on the utility to fund municipal operations. So with that, I'm happy to say that administration, this is the punchline to the newspapers. Administration would like to support a $1 million dividend to be paid to all electric customers over a 12-month period from April 1st, 2017 to March 31, 2018. This does assume some of the other items that we have discussed here today about the way we view property taxes, the amount of capital being at $4.2 million. If you all decide that capital should be $6 million a year, then this dividend's not really going to work. If you all decide that you want a 0% tax increase this year, then this dividend's going to have to change. But if all other items in the budget stay the same, we feel comfortable that we can do a dividend across the board to all ratepayers. It would be based on their actual consumption for 2019 or 2017. You would see it on your bill as a dividend payment that you're receiving every year that's credited towards your electric bill on a monthly basis.
I think the language we settled on was rate adjustment, so it would, based on your usage, you would see a rate adjustment as a credit.
Right.
Pat and then Ben?
It is rate adjustment.
Sorry, I didn't bring my multiple calculations, but I guess the question is, if you're saying you want to maintain at least $1.5 million in free balance, and we're going to have 2.8, even with $1 million dividend, why are we not declaring a larger dividend?
So as you can see from the projections here, we're actually projecting $1 million a year dividend out over 3 years. If I projected that one more year, the free balance would fall to $1.5 million. So instead of having a big dividend this year and then nothing next year, the thought process was to do it on a progressive basis, a little more slow and steady. That's why, instead of having someone, boy, my electric bill was so much lower last year, now it's so much higher this year because, well, last year you got the huge dividend and this year, or rate adjustment, and this year you're not getting anything.
I think it's a good idea to look at it over multiple years.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, could you just put in 2020 then when we have the rate adjustment discussion? Thank you.
Ben?
Okay, so Pat may be surprised, but I had the same question. But in addition, if we look at this and say, all right, it should be $1 million a year, we want to flatten it out. And I appreciate the reason for doing that, wanting to have a fairly stable dividend. But you really have no assurance, right, that those numbers could be $1 million a year going forward?
No assurance, but the large amount of free balance that we are projecting at the end of 2000, or at the beginning of 2017, this 2.8 million tells us that we should be able to do it for at least 2 years. And then the third year, and on the out years, it's really going to depend on how much you want to use out of the utility to maybe fund capital or to fund the operating budget. We're, with our goal of using less in the municipal budget, we had this number going down every year. So this number is going down 60,000, and it's going to go down 140, then it's going to go down another 100. So
Understood.
If those things change, the numbers change. If the sales change, we have another $23 million a year sell instead of 22.4, that's going to change. We're going to see consumption clearly change once the GVR project gets online. But
So what do you do with the difference? Are you just going to hold it on an account that's dedicated to paying a dividend in future years?
No, we'll just sit in free balance as municipal surplus sits in free balance, or any surplus sits in balance. It sits in the account.
I guess one question. So what restrictions are there on using that money in an emergency?
Yeah.
If we lost a big chunk of the electric utility, the tree fell into a James substation and wiped half of it out, are we allowed to tap into that?
We would do two things. We'd tap into the capital, and yes, we could tap into that, those funds that are there, absolutely.
Okay. Thanks.
I'd like to go, just on the record, I'd like to talk to you some more detail about this.
Sure,
Not now.
No, I'm not trying. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Later on.
Just, I mean, we've been here late enough.
Ben.
Right? Thank you. I'm tired, too.
So I will speed things along and just tell you that, we talk about, so there's the dividend there. We talk about the transfer to the municipal budget. There it is in the electric budget. Here it is in the municipal budget. So that's how those two are connected. These are strategic planning guidelines. We are moving towards compliance on this one here, which is guideline 3A, which is that utility transfer. By decreasing the water utility transfer and by decreasing the electric utility transfer, we're heading in the right direction there. We are a little high on municipal surplus based on this guideline, though the 25% was kind of as Ben said, a thumb in the air. But there is something that I want to talk about, and hopefully we can maybe even discuss having a vote on it this evening, though I know it's late. Reserve for tax appeals. We have $341,000 set aside in a pot for tax appeals. Tax appeals occur when someone says, I don't think my property should be assessed at $70 million. I think it should be assessed at $63 million. Bob Lanigan works on this every day. That's what he does. We have two major properties in town, one that's valued at $70 million and one that's valued at, I believe, $20 million, that are contesting their assessments over multiple years, 2013, 14, 15, 16. And eventually we're going to settle with them. And when we settle with them, we're going to have to pay them back some of the taxes that they paid. And we're conservatively estimating that those payments will be in and around $400,000 that could happen anytime this year or later next year. The amount that we have in the tax appeal reserve is $341,000. And talking to the auditor, they are helping to prepare what's called the annual financial statements. Those are another set of documents that we have to create for the state. They're due February 10th. And they wanted to advocate, and I supported them, that we immediately transfer $200,000 of the municipal surplus that we talked about 10 minutes ago and put it into the tax appeal reserve. We can do that through the budget process, or if we were to vote on it tonight, it would be executed in the annual financial statements, where $200,000 from surplus would go right to the tax appeal reserve.
I would recommend that you do that, because what I will tell you is that the office market, I know New York City is softening. I have to believe I would recommend that that be done. I know the office market in New York City is softening. I have to believe in New Jersey it is as well. And if their attorney uses comps, you're probably going to get whacked. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely recommend putting that money in there.
Okay.
Jim, you said that $200,000 is a conservative amount. Is that enough? You think we should consider more?
I think so. I think if we have $541,000 and we're thinking the payouts could be $400,000, I think we'll be okay. One thing to keep in mind is these happen typically right after revaluation.
Right.
We had the reval in 2012, so we're getting them now. Once we kind of go around the merry-go-round or go through the settlement discussions with them and we get settled, they typically will slow down unless something systemic happens, as Bob Landrigan talks about. If we had a major, depression or recession in office space in New York City, they could come back and say, hey, I'm going to contest your valuation again. We haven't seen that. We've had others that we've settled over the past few years, and once they settle, they're happy for a while. Over the long term, I think we should probably come to some sort of, hey, every year let's really keep a better eye on that number. It's something we haven't watched. In the past, we've just chucked a ton of money into it when we could and then sat there and let it go down. I think it probably makes sense to monitor it and maybe every year be thinking we should be putting $100,000 in it. So we'll do a better job reporting that, but I think $200,000 is enough this year.
So the question right now is we can either do it as part of the budget or do it now. And if we want to do it now, I'll entertain a motion from the council to...
I would say do it now. Get it in.
Okay, so the motion would be $200,000 to be transferred from surplus now into the tax appeal reserve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Ms. Byrne?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate you doing that.
Resolution to come back
I don't
Actually, Liz and I talked about it, and
Right.
what we did there is enough.
reflect it in the minutes,
So-
right?
Collect it in the minutes and we'll be good.
Exactly, be reflected in the minutes. So, oops, major challenges, the joint meeting we talked about, is $4.2 million the right amount of capital, trying to reduce our reliance on the utility, the financial stability of the water utility, all the collective bargaining agreements expiring, and the reserve for tax appeals, which you just fixed. So that's no longer a challenge. We'll take that off the list.
Here we go.
Those are challenges for you all to take home and meditate on. And as I talked about before, the major decisions in this budget are capital, spending, taxes, and that utility surplus. I think I want to entertain any questions now, but understanding everyone's tired, we'll be able to circle back next Monday and then on February 27th on all these questions. And I'll also be available individually for anyone to ask any questions to me as well. That includes the public.
Good job, Jim.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mayor, I move to...
The Tom Brady of municipal budgeting.
No, he's got a long way to go.
I was rooting for the
It's
Falcons.
17
But he
years.
was never...
You had a motion for
Now, can I
adjournment?
do it? Yeah, Mayor,
I actually can't adjourn yet, I'm sorry. Invitation for public, anyone wishing to discuss either the budget or anything else on your mind, please step forward. Seeing none,
move we adjourn.
Second, third, and
you all well done, and thank you for everything tonight.
Did you get to talk to Mike Brianna? No, he was very calm, but when at the end of the meeting, he came up, this was all political.